So, good morning or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are in the world today. I hope you're safe and well. And today's presentation is going to be on the structure of creation. And this might not be what you're expecting. It's quite heavy on the Vedic literature side of things. It's quite deep. But what I'm going to try to do is explain to you in a very succinct and easy way for you to be able to start grasping it. You can always go back onto YouTube and watch it again, take down notes if you want. So these are some of the platforms that we're on. Thinktree Hub over here accredit our courses. And if you want to join any of the Kriya courses, you can through Thinktree, but you can also do directly. And how you do that is we offer a lot of things for free. So we do these webinars, live webinars at least once a week. Next week, we're doing one on spirituality and business with an organization in the UK called Thinktree, run by Rajan. And then the following week, we have a talk with Vineet Sinha, who was the director of the film Ramayan in LA. And he was trying to make this movie at the scale of The Lord of the Rings, and he was looking for funds, etc. But we'll discuss that in a couple of weeks. We offer these free live webinars. We have free posts on Instagram and Facebook. And I also have a book which I'm writing. Actually, there's two books which are coming, and they will be available to you digitally to purchase. And we have the Satsang group, which only a very, very small amount of people nowadays get into. Basically, if you've been with the Mind Decoded since the beginning, then you're in that group. Or if you are a Kriya Yoga student and you wish to be in that group, then you're added to that group. Okay, so that's that bit done. Now, let's talk about the structure of creation. And this is a really interesting concept because it's very deep and it's really interesting. There is a lot of science involved in this, so a lot of astrophysics, quantum science. And what's really interesting is that there's a lot of research coming out from Western think tanks, Western organizations, universities, which talk about the universe and how it's expanding in multi-universities and how these universities are linked through wormholes and black holes, and there's all sorts of things going on. So a lot of the things that Stephen Hawking used to talk about in his earlier days, and I think towards the kind of end of his life over the last kind of 10, 20 years, he kind of was moving away from that. However, there are some of the older scientists from his days, like Kip Thorne, Carl Sagan, etc., that always did refer back to the Vedas and the Sutras and the Shlokas, and Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla in particular through social media is very popular with having referred to some of the Vedanta philosophy of Swami Vivekananda ji. So let's have a look and see what we're going to talk about. And what I want to do first is use a sutra from the Yog Vishesh, because the Yog Vishesh is very scientific, it's very philosophical, and every sutra that you read and every shlok that you read is written in Sanskrit. And the reason why it's written in Sanskrit is because Sanskrit is not really a language that you speak. It's more of spiritual formulas. So if you take a formula like everybody has come across or knows of, E equals mc squared by Albert Einstein, everybody knows that formula, but what people don't know is what that formula actually means and the amount of work that Albert Einstein did in creating that simple formula, which everybody is aware of, but nobody really knows what it actually means in its true essence. So this sutra in English says that just as the foam, the waves and the bubbles are not different from water, even so the world which has come out of the self is not different from the self. Now, what we mean by here is that Parma Brahm, this singular, there's no real word in English to really explain it, so I'll try my best to explain it in English. There is no real word to explain it except for saying that it's a singular point which has a desire but no desire. It's complete nothingness. So if you take I was giving this analogy to one of the yoga students, that if you take like an onion, and you keep peeling that onion and take away all the layers and take away all the layers till eventually there's nothing there. That is literally the same type of concept that we're talking about here, is that there is this nothingness, and there's no other way to explain it. And from this nothingness, everything else has emerged. And the reason why everything else has emerged from this is because this nothingness is pure bliss. So we'll do like a webinar on the sheets of delusion, even called the koshas, and the one right in the middle is known as Sat Chit Anand, which can only be truly described as bliss, not happiness, but bliss, which is very different to happiness. So Sat Chit Anand is from where everything has emerged from. And the reason why everything emerged from this is because it had a desire. Now, this is the complicated part, because how can something which has a desire but no desire at the same time have a desire? But when you think about whenever you're happy or you're feeling, I know that, sorry, so I'm being asked to explain in Hindi. I have put this message up and said that I can't explain this in Hindi because there are people here also who only understand English. So for that, unfortunately, I can't explain it in Hindi. But if you give me a message later on Instagram or on my Gmail account, then if you need to be explained in Hindi, let's do that as a one-to-one. Okay, so yeah, where was I? I was saying that this whole of creation has come out of this one singular source, which has a desire but no desire, and it is this nothingness. And if you think about whenever you're happy, as an analogy, you really want to spread that happiness, and you kind of make everyone else around you happy. Just like whenever you're angry, the people around you can feel frustrated as well. So think along those lines in terms of how creation came. And at the same time, when this desireless desire had this Satchitanand, which was being expressed outwards, it wanted the singular source wanted the Satchitanand to come back into the one singular source as well. Okay, I'm being told my voice keeps breaking up. It must be your connection, because the connection here seems to be fine. So before we go to the hierarchy system, let me just explain a little bit more around what we're talking about here. Singular source, desireless desire, Parma Brahm, has this expression of Sat Chit Anand, which goes outwards. But at the same time, it wants this bliss to come back inwards. And there you have duality. You have created opposites and negatives. You've created the guns, the sattva, rajas, tamas, and everything that comes as a result of this. Now we're going to talk about vibrations in a second, but let's take a look at this. And this is how the system of creation is built. And I think from talking to some people, they were kind of alluding towards, the system is made up of deities that they've come across, but probably the only one that you have really heard of in this diagram here is Ishwar. And I'm going to explain to you very simply what each one of those means. So, and if you watch any of the serials of Ramayana or Mahabharata, they talk a lot about the Teen Lok. And the Teen Lok are the three worlds. And the three worlds are the thought world. So, for example, if you have like a business idea, or you have an idea for a project at university or college or whatever, you first come up with the idea, the thought. Then that thought, there's energy put into that thought. That is known as the astral world of energies. And then once you put the energy into that thought, you get the physical outcome, which ultimately is creation, which is us. Likewise, creation has been built more or less in a similar way, and everything is built on like a hierarchy system, like if you have a multinational organization or a multinational conglomerate organization, they are built on more or less a similar system as the Vedas have alluded to, and how creation has been built. And at the macro level, there are 7 levels, and the one right at the top is known as Maha Prakriti. She is the female expression of this one singular source and looks after over the other six underneath it. And those are Ishwar, which you can explain it as like a cosmic architect who looks over all the ideational or the thought energy that has created the cosmos and everything within it. Then there is Hirandarva, which is the cosmic astral engineer, and he or she directs the energies of the astral cosmos. Then there is Bharut, the cosmic builder of the physical universe. Then there is Prognya, which is the creator of human consciousness. Then there is Tejas, the engineer controlling the astral body of man. And then finally, there is Viswa, which is the builder of man's gross physical body. And these six are the six levels of creation, and everything else, all the other deities or we call energies, live underneath them. And there are 72 million different types of energies, which the Vedas say create the whole of creation. And we are only ever beginning to scratch the surface of what we are actually seeing in modern day times. So, for example, I've been through this in a previous webinar where I have spoken about the cosmic cycles or the yuga cycles. And the reason why a lot of these concepts and the reason why, for example, we are communicating today, me sat here in the UK and there are people in the United Kingdom, perhaps hundreds of miles away from me, and there are people in India, thousands of miles away from me. But we're today connecting in real time talking about very deep spiritual esoteric concepts of the Vedas and relating it back to the spiritual science, which is being researched and is actually being published. Now, whether those scientists can see it or not, they can make the direct link. The link exists because the Vedas, the sutras, and the shlokas, like I said, there are spiritual formulas, and when these spiritual formulas can be broken down, then you are able to understand the true spiritual essence. Now, why was this not happening 100, 200, 300 years ago? Was because, as I explained in the Yuga Cycle webinar, that we are now going through the phase of what we call the ascending Dwapar Yuga, which is the yuga in which these subtle energies of the astral world are going to be discovered, and they will eventually be related back to the sutras and the Vedas. So, like Sanatan Dharma is not a religion, Hinduism is a religion, but Sanatan Dharma is pure spirituality, is pure spiritual science, is ultimately the truth. And the truth is all around us, and therefore it will always be around. And this is the big confusion between religion and Sanatan Dharma. So it is said that a lot of kind of idol worship or the worship of deities really came into play into India or ancient India after the war of the Mahabharata, which took place towards the end of the descending Dwapar Yuga. So the yuga in which all this dharma, this knowledge, this spiritual science was eventually being used, and whatever they did have was being used for the wrong purposes at that time in the vast majority of cases. Hence the reason that is why the war of the Mahabharata happened between ultimately two groups of cousins over wealth and land and kingdoms and empires. And there is a very deep spiritual reason as to why that happened. And I did do a webinar on Krishna, not Krishna Decoded, Mahabharata Decoded, and you can go and watch that. But I will do some other webinars around that. So this is the hierarchy system of the Vedas, also you could call as the Teen Lok. And it's not a very simple concept to grasp. It's a very deep concept to grasp. And there is a lot involved in this. I mean, one word there, Ishwar, is normally, people will say Ishwar is God, which it is. But then above that, there is Maha Prakriti or Shiva and Shakti, which then is like the duality part of opposites, negatives, males and females. But then there is an even higher power than that, this Parama Brahm, this singular source of energy. And There is a story which is told in I think it's Autobiography of a Yogi or Man's Eternal Quest. I'm pretty sure it's one or the other. But there is a story where there's the three gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are talking about who is the most powerful. And a little boy appears and he produces a piece of stick and he says to Brahma, "Can you create a piece of stick which is exactly like this?" And Brahma tries and tries and tries and he can't create it. And then eventually he goes to Vishnu and he says, "Can you save this piece of stick from dissolving before your eyes?" And the stick is fully dissolving into nothingness. And Vishnu is unable, as the preserver of creation who takes an avatar to uphold Dharma, cannot stop this piece of stick from dissolving. Then he produces this piece of stick again and asks Shiva to destroy it. And Shiva tries with all his might, all his power, and he can't destroy it. And then the boy disappears. Then those three gods realize that behind their power is an even greater power. And that greater power is this one singular source, this whole concept of zero, of nothingness, which comes from ancient India, which is obviously included in a very important part into mathematics and science, etc. So that is in a very kind of simplistic way of explaining to you the hierarchy system of the Vedas in terms of how creation is built. And the deities which reside underneath each one of these reside in each one of these in what is known as it's of the spiritual eye, the blue color of cosmic consciousness, which science calls the unified grand theory or the Planck constant, 0 point energy, but it is actually even more than that. It's a very subtle energy, and your soul, your consciousness within can access that. Because think about it this way: your awareness and consciousness just now is stuck on the surface of your body and your mind. And your body and your mind is very predominantly heavy in the tamas and the rajas gun, so in the negative and the neutral gun. Whereas when you go into more subtle levels of awareness through these Kriya Yoga meditation techniques and start observing the breath and going into deeper and deeper levels of your consciousness, into deeper brainwave patterns, what happens is that you start redirecting the energy which you're putting out into the external world of Maya back inwards into the astral world, into your astral body, up through the Shushumna and into the Agna Chakra, or the center of consciousness between the eyebrows. What happens then is that you start interacting with these levels of consciousness, which are on the screen just now. And your awareness and your consciousness is now connected at that level. And when your awareness and your consciousness becomes connected at that level, you can do things which most ordinary people with ordinary consciousness cannot do. Now, there is research coming out which is showing that we actually go into these states throughout the whole entire day. And it does depend a lot on your practice and your past karma as well. But you could, we call it zoning out, but you can literally go into this state without even knowing that you're in this state and still be awake, like conscious. However, what we teach through Kriya Yoga meditation, Kriya Yoga concentration techniques, etc., is how to access this level of consciousness at will, like the yogis could do. For example, Paramahansa Yogananda was once said that I can do one perfect Kriya Pranayama and go into Samadhi, just like that, with one perfect Kriya Pranayama, which takes 22 seconds internal, 22 seconds external breath, and go into one and go straight into Samadhi. A lot of people spend many years practicing various parts of Kriya Yoga system to be able to do that. But then people like Paramahansa Yogananda, souls like Paramahansa Yogananda, were practicing concentration from the age of about 4 or 5 for 4 hours plus every day. I mean, he was famous for doing it for 24 hours, practicing concentration. And concentration is the most important part of anything that you do in life, whether it's material or whether it is spiritual. To access this level within creation, to be able to have an expanded consciousness and a focused mind requires for you to go internal. Now, just as quantum scientists talk about the quantum level, and at the quantum level, there is this whole sea of consciousness. And what they say is that in the sea of consciousness, it's it seems to be still, but it's reverberating with energies. And these energies, they describe them as being circles, which come out of it and then they turn into something else, a photon or electron or a neutron, meson. They're not quite sure of the process of how that happens, but they know that this is what's happening. Likewise, just as the universe has this level of consciousness, which I call Rama consciousness, relating it back to the Ramayana decoded, this level of consciousness also exists within you. So all of this macro level, all of this micro level is all actually within you. And the only way to access it is to bring your awareness to that level of consciousness. And this is where these scientific yogic techniques are used to be able to do that. And although yoga is, hatha yoga is very popular because it helps, people to shape their body and become more flexible and look in a particular way, which is great. But hatha yoga is also part of a higher system, such as Kriya yoga, in which hatha yoga is used to perfect the body, to make it more supple and make it less, prone to stress and anxieties and aches and pains, which allows you then to transcend your consciousness to a much deeper level within the universe. Because ultimately, your heart is like a dial which can be tuned, and when you're able to tune that and you know how to tune it from a scientific point of view, and let's not forget that back in 1991, I think it was in 92, there was actually research which had started coming out that was showing and proving, hypothesizing that the heart actually has a brain of its own, and it's more than what we think it is. It's literally feeling. And I want to talk a little bit about this jit, or this feeling, very briefly, because this whole creation has really come out of what we call in Vedic literature as Vivasvat, or the seventh Manu. So there's 14 Manus, or 14 fathers of creation, and we are now going through the seventh, and I think the next one is called Savarni, the eighth Manu. So Vivasvat means, when broken down, one that shines forth light. And internally, when we're talking about this light, we're talking about the light of the spiritual eye. And externally, we're talking about the light of God. So what happens is that your soul, which is a drop of this Parma Brahm that has come from this nothingness, your soul has a lower vibratory frequency than Parma Brahm. Because remember, we're saying that your soul has come from this singular source, but lots of souls have been coming out of it. And when your soul and everybody else's soul comes out of this singular source, it comes under the expression of Maya and everything else that is being created at the same time when this all happened, when creation happened. And what happens then is that it becomes a lower vibration, and it comes under, through a process, under the influence of chit, or feeling. When that chit and that feeling evolves, it comes to the point of thinking. So if you think about feeling is followed by thinking. But when that thinking, under this delusion that's being created, which your soul is now part of, it comes under the influence of ego, or ahamkar, it continues to evolve. And from that, the whole concept of intelligence starts developing, so buddhi. Then the mind starts taking control, and then the mind, it comes under the influence of either buddhi, or comes either the influence of the blind sense organs, which are being developed, as manas, which can only interact with 0.04% of the reality that is around you. And this is why transcending your consciousness into more deeper levels is really important. So in the Mahabharata, for example, in the Gita, it talks about Ganga who drowns her sons, and she drowns six of them, but the seventh one is Bhisham Pitama, who is referred to as Abhasa Katyani, or the universal ego which exists within mankind, which exists here. And that ego cannot be destroyed. It can only really destroy itself, because you have to have the desire, but no desire at the same time, to go from Samadhi, which exists in the point between the eyebrows, to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is the Sahasrara. At that point, your soul becomes free from karma. But it becomes free from karma in the physical world, and then you go into the astral world where you have astral karma to perform, to then go into the thought world, the ideational world. And then from there, your soul becomes an avatar. And this is where avatars come from. Avatars are perfected souls who have practiced some very high level of some sort of spiritual science, which is in the Vedas. And then they decide that, you know what, I'm going to come back into the physical world, into the Bhugarbha, to help humanity. Because with regards to the Yuga cycles, the Yuga cycles go up and down in Dharam. So they go up and down, civilizations go up in spirituality and science, and then come back down. This is the reason why you find so much, the reason why India is so rich in culture, it's so rich in wealth. At one point, it was, it was once referred to as Soni di Chiria, because there was so much wealth and gold there, and diamonds, and everything that you would want to desire physically, because it had all come from this spiritual science. And the spiritual science and the rishis of ancient India said that you can have all of this, you can have wealth, but you can also have spiritual development as well. You can be like Janak, Sita's father, who was known as a royal rishi. There's different levels of rishis. A royal rishi is like well, in that kind of classification, the lowest form. There's a true rishi, there's a Brahma rishi, and then there is a royal rishi. He was a royal rishi and a king. You can be like that. You can have that. People have had it before. And it all happens through this whole system of being able to practice and apply Kriya Yoga. But the problem that we have in this day and age is that that system and that schooling is not given to us from an early age. And there are a lot of people that I've come across who have said to me that they have always had a desire to practice meditation or be attracted towards spirituality from a very young age. But the problem is that we live in an environment and in family systems and a culture where we're not allowed to express that, because everything around us is not set up for us to allow us to do that. Whereas in ancient India, the reason why ashrams were around and rishis were around is because that everything around there was built in such a way, was constructed in such a way that it only served the purpose of developing the students to the point that they became almost perfected beings. And at the same time, they were also wealthy, they were rich, but they were also spiritually rich as well. That system and that kind of schooling all comes down and down and down and down through the yoga cycles. And this is the reason why there are these different various manus. And in each manu, creation goes up and down multiple thousands and thousands of times. So India is one part, and even in Africa, there is, certain tribes over in Africa that talk about spirituality. There's Egyptians, there's Atlanteans. There's a lot of things that are coming out, and it all seems to go back to one of the most advanced civilizations of that time, being ancient India. That a lot of the knowledge and spirituality which was coming out, even things like, if you ever read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the concepts within there are very, very similar to Vedic literature, and it's not as old as Vedic literature. And even these people who have written these books and do this research have all come back and said that actually it's it seems to go back to something even older, and that something even older is the Vedas ultimately. So that is a kind of a snapshot on the structure of creation, and it will be, the presentation will be available to you on YouTube. Do please subscribe to YouTube, because all the YouTube webinars are there. There are ones that I do throughout the week, which I upload, that I don't do live, on various different topics or questions that people are asking me, common questions. And there's a lot to learn from there. So keep a notepad and a pen, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And if you do have any questions for me, if you want to join up to the Kriya Yoga lessons, I don't charge a specific fee for it unless you're going through ThinkTree. It's basically a pranayami or a guru dakshina. You pay, and then I can give you the techniques and explain them to you and make them personable to you. So if you want to do that, contact me on my Gmail account, romandecoded@gmail.com, or send me a message on Instagram. It's probably easier and quicker to send me an email than a message on Instagram or Facebook, because I get hundreds and hundreds of messages from different platforms. I don't always get round in a timely fashion to reply back to you. So I do apologize for that. But email me. Cool. I hope you've enjoyed that presentation. And if you do have any questions, you can either send me a WhatsApp if you've got my WhatsApp details, or send me a message. Thank you very much.